I was staying in a small hostel in Tokyo, nothing fancy, just one of those budget places you find when you're traveling on a tight schedule and tighter money. It was the kind with bunk beds stacked 3 high in each corner of a narrow room. There were no private rooms, just rows of beds and a tiny walkway between them. The kind of place where you get used to hearing people snore, shuffle in their sheets, and whisper to each other in the dark. Everyone was usually respectful, more or less. You'd say a quiet hello when you first entered, maybe trade names or where you're from, then just coexist until one of you moved on. I had the bottom bunk near the window. It was winter, and the hostel didn't heat much beyond a few space heaters, so I had my sleeping bag zipped up to my chin, plus one of their heavy wool blankets pulled over me. Above me slept a guy from Canada. I only knew because I heard him mention it earlier to someone while I was pretending to scroll through my phone. I never talked to him directly, never even saw his face properly, just caught glimpses of his legs coming down the ladder or heard his feet thump when he climbed up. That night, I went to sleep around midnight. I had walked the whole day around Shibuya and Harajuku. My legs sore and my body ready to just crash. The room was full. Maybe 10 people, everyone in their own bunks, quiet, a few muffled phone screens glowing here and there. Some were already asleep. The lights had been out for a while. I had my earplugs in and my sleeping mask on, like always, and I remember feeling warm and buried in the blankets and slowly fading off into that heavy, slow kind of sleep. I don't know what time it was when it happened. Maybe 2 or 3 a.m. The noise that woke me was loud and sharp. A sudden bam, like someone had jumped or fallen off a bed and hit the floor hard. My eyes snapped open, and even before I took off the mask, I felt something was wrong. I sat up, pulled the mask up to my forehead, and looked around. Someone had turned the main light on. It was bright, too bright for that hour. I blinked hard, trying to adjust, and then I saw him. The guy from the bunk above me was standing right there, right in front of my bed, completely naked. The blanket from his bed was wrapped around his neck like a cape, literally tied or tucked in at the top, and the rest of it draped down his back. But it didn't cover anything else. Everything else was just there, hanging, visible, like he didn't even know or didn't care. He was barefoot, pale-skinned, lanky, with messy hair sticking in all directions. He wasn't looking at me as much as through me. His eyes were wide, really wide, and his pupils looked small, like he was in some kind of shock. His arms hung limp at his sides. His whole body was trembling a little. He didn't say anything, not one word. He just stood there and stared. I was frozen for a second, totally thrown off. My brain hadn't caught up to what was happening. I just sat there under my blanket, holding it close, staring up at this naked guy 2 feet away from me in full light, breathing like he'd just run a mile. And then, just like that, he spun around and bolted out of the room. He didn't walk. He didn't stumble. He ran, fast. His feet slapped hard against the wooden floor, then out the door, and I heard the hallway door creak open and shut again. The whole room was dead quiet. I saw a few people poking their heads out from their bunks, groggy, confused, some sitting up slowly like they weren't sure what they'd just seen. One guy across the room sat up, rubbed his face, then laid back down. No one said anything. No one moved. I stood up and walked over to the window and pulled back the cheap curtain just a bit. The window looked out to the front of the building, just a small street with vending machines and dim street lights. The cold air seeped in through the window frame. And then there he was, running, naked, still wearing the blanket like a cape, flying behind him like some twisted costume. He ran once past the front of the hostel, full speed, like someone chasing something or being chased. Then he disappeared around the corner. A few seconds later, he came back around the other side, ran straight past the building again, same direction. Bare feet on cold pavement, his breath puffing out like smoke in the winter air. He didn't look up at the window, didn't look at anything, just ran in a big, dumb loop. No shoes, no clothes, just the blanket and his wide eyes. I stood there for a while, just watching, waiting to see if someone was following him, or if maybe staff would come out, or police or something. But no one did. Nobody else came out into the street. The building stayed quiet. He came back after a few minutes, walked this time, still naked, still barefoot, the blanket dragging behind him now like a wet towel. He opened the front door, came up the stairs. I could hear the creaks, and walked back into the room. The door clicked shut behind him. Still no one said a word. The lights were still on. He walked calmly to his bed, climbed the ladder like nothing happened, laid down on the mattress, and pulled a different blanket over himself. The cape one was just hanging off the side of the bed now. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I sat there, fully awake, still under my blanket. My back against the wall, my knees pulled up. Every creak, every cough, every shift of someone else's blanket made me jump. I kept watching his bunk from the corner of my eye, waiting for some movement, something to explain what just happened. But nothing did. He didn't move again. He didn't get up to use the bathroom. He didn't say anything. In the morning, I got up as early as I could without making noise. I packed my bag fast, skipped breakfast, and checked out before the sun was fully up. I never talked to the front desk. I didn't say goodbye to anyone. I didn't want to explain. I just wanted to be somewhere else. On my way out, I passed the window and looked out toward the street where he had run in circles the night before. There were no signs of anything. The vending machines blinked like usual. A man in a suit walked past, sipping hot coffee from a can. Everything was normal again. I don't know what happened to him. Maybe drugs. Maybe some kind of episode. I don't know. I've replayed that night in my head so many times trying to make sense of it. Trying to figure out if there were signs. If something had been off before that I just hadn't noticed. But there wasn't anything. Just a guy from Canada sleeping on the top bunk. Quiet like everyone else. That night didn't feel like a prank. It didn't feel like someone messing around. It felt like a real crack in reality. Like something in his mind just snapped wide open. And I was there when it happened. I never stayed in hostels again after that. Not even once. I started paying more for private rooms. I don't care about the extra cost. After seeing something like that, after feeling that helpless in the middle of the night, surrounded by strangers, not knowing if someone's going to do something dangerous next, I just couldn't risk it anymore. I never saw him again. Didn't see him at breakfast. Didn't read about him in any news. It was like it just happened and disappeared into thin air. But I still remember his eyes, wide and blank, and the cold slap of his feet on the floor, and the cape, that stupid cape. I was driving from Texas to California, trying to make it to San Diego for a job interview. I had planned it all out, but somewhere after Phoenix, I started feeling the kind of tired that sits in your bones. I'd been on the road since early morning, and the sun was starting to dip behind the hills. I knew I wouldn't make it all the way to my destination that night. I pulled over at a gas station, got some beef jerky, a bottle of water, and asked the cashier if there was a cheap place to sleep nearby. He pointed me toward a small road that ran parallel to the highway, said there was a budget motel about 10 minutes down. I wasn't expecting anything fancy. I just needed a bed, a working lock on the door, and maybe a shower. When I pulled into the parking lot, it was already getting dark. The place looked like it hadn't been updated in decades. A flickering neon sign buzzed above the office door. It just said motel. No name, nothing else. There were 10 rooms, all lined up in a single row, and only 2 other cars parked out front. One was a rusted-out pickup truck. The other was a sedan with a flat tire. The guy at the front desk barely looked up from his TV. He slid me a key, an actual key, not a card, with a plastic tag that said Room 6. I asked how much, and he just said, cash only. I handed him the $60 and didn't say anything else. I was too tired to argue or ask questions. He didn't give me a receipt. I just wanted to sleep. Room 6 was near the end, right beside Room 7, which didn't have a car parked in front. I assumed it was empty. The key stuck a little in the lock, and I had to jiggle it a bit before the door opened. The room was stale, not dirty exactly, but it had that damp, closed-up smell like no one had opened a window in years. The carpet was that short, stiff kind you find in old waiting rooms, stained in a few spots. The bed was sunken in the middle, covered with a thin, floral patterned blanket that felt like it had been washed 1,000 times but never got clean. I dropped my bag on the floor, kicked off my shoes, and sat on the edge of the bed. The room was silent except for the hum of the AC unit under the window, which blew lukewarm air and rattled every few minutes. I flipped through the TV channels, mostly static, some local news, and one channel playing some late-night infomercial crap. I left it on for the background noise while I brushed my teeth in the tiny bathroom. The water smelled faintly metallic. The shower curtain was stuck to the rod in one corner, and the mirror had spots that looked like rust or old toothpaste. I got into bed fully clothed. I didn't trust the sheets. I pulled the blanket over me and stared at the ceiling, listening to the occasional car pass by on the road behind the motel. I kept thinking I'd fall asleep quickly, but the tiredness in my body didn't seem to connect to my brain. I lay there for what felt like an hour, shifting around, trying to find a comfortable position. At some point, I heard a soft creak. Not from inside my room. It was faint but clear, like someone stepping on the floorboards just outside. I held my breath and listened. Came again, slow and steady. Then a pause. Then again. It sounded like someone walking right outside my door, pacing back and forth. I thought it might have been another guest taking a smoke break or walking their dog, but there were no footsteps moving away. Just the same pacing, like 4 steps one way, pause, then back the other direction. I sat up and turned off the TV so I could hear better. The AC rattled again, and for a moment I couldn't hear anything. Then the sound came again, this time slower. I looked at the door. No shadows under it. No knock. No voices. I got up and checked the peephole. Nothing. I opened the curtain slightly and looked outside. The parking lot was still. The old truck and the flat-tire sedan hadn't moved. No one was out there, but I swear I had heard it. I waited another minute. Nothing. I locked the deadbolt and got back into bed. I told myself it was probably the building settling or maybe an animal. But then, as I was finally starting to drift off, I heard a noise from the wall behind the bed. A soft knock, like someone tapping their knuckles, slow and deliberate. Just once. Then again, 3 taps this time. I sat up straight. That wall connected to room 7. I stared at it, listening. Another knock. For this time, it wasn't loud, but it was precise. I was wide awake now. I got up and pressed my ear against the wall. Nothing. Just the faint hum of electricity and the AC still rattling. I went outside to check. The door to room 7 was closed, but the curtain was pulled back just an inch, and I could see light inside. The room looked occupied, but there was no car out front. I thought maybe someone had checked in and got dropped off. Maybe they were just making noise, maybe watching TV. I got back in my room and sat on the bed, thinking if I should switch rooms or maybe leave. But I was dead tired and figured I was overthinking it. I stayed dressed and just laid on top of the blanket. Not fully sleeping, more like dozing with one eye open. Around 3 a.m., I heard a sound that made my stomach drop. The door handle, not knocking, the actual handle turning slowly, like someone was trying to open it without making noise. It clicked lightly, then silence. I held my breath. My heart was beating in my throat. I didn't move. Then, it turned again, just slightly. But the deadbolt held. Whoever it was, they didn't knock. They didn't call out. They just stood there. I couldn't see their shadow under the door. I sat there for at least 5 minutes, listening, waiting. Nothing. I got up and looked through the peephole again. No one. I pulled the curtain back just a bit, same as before. Still no one. The parking lot was dead still. I didn't see anyone walking off or hiding. I didn't even see movement in the window of room 7 anymore. I didn't sleep after that. I waited for the sun to rise. As soon as there was a sliver of daylight, I grabbed my stuff and left. I didn't even check out. Just dropped the key on the front desk and walked out. The guy from the night before wasn't even there. I drove until I found a diner an hour down the highway, got coffee, eggs, and tried to calm myself. While I sat there, I decided to look up the motel on my phone. There weren't many reviews, a couple of 1-star ratings, all saying the place was sketchy. But then I found a forum post, not a review site, just a random message board. Someone had written about a motel near that same exit. No name, Just a description, 10 rooms, neon sign, cash only. The post said something about a guy who'd been living in room 7 for years. He wasn't listed as a guest. The desk guy knew about it. Local cops didn't do much because the place was technically private property. People who stayed in the room next to him said they heard tapping. Some said their doors were tried in the middle of the night. One guy even said he caught someone standing right outside his window at 2 a.m., staring in through the crack in the curtain. I don't know if it was true or just someone trying to scare people, but I believed it. I remembered that curtain in room 7 pulled back just enough, like someone had been standing there, watching me come and go. I don't remember the drive the rest of that day, just kept going. Every motel I stayed at after that, I checked the door 3 times. I never stayed in a room with an adjoining wall if I could help it, and I never, ever trusted those cheap places by the highway again. Not because of ghosts or monsters, but because people, real, quiet, patient people, are sometimes way worse. A few years ago, me and 3 friends were backpacking through Europe. We'd been planning the trip for months, saving money, mapping routes, booking cheap hostels along the way. Berlin was our last stop. We were tired, kind of broke, but excited to end the trip in a city that we'd all been looking forward to. We booked a 6-bed mixed dorm in a hostel somewhere near Kreuzberg. It wasn't anything fancy. Shared bathroom, basic beds, and lockers that squeaked every time you tried to open them. But it was cheap, and after weeks of hostels, we were used to the noise, the smells, the random roommates. It was just part of the experience. The room had 3 bunk beds. Me and one friend took the bottom bunks, the other 2 top. When we checked in, one of the beds was already taken. Blanket folded neatly, suitcase at the foot, and a small black purse on the pillow. The rest of the room was a mess after 10 minutes of us arriving. Clothes out of backpacks, chargers everywhere, someone always trying to connect to the hostel Wi-Fi. The roommate showed up an hour later, an old woman maybe in her 60s or early 70s. She was tall, thin, her hair mostly gray but tied neatly in a bun. She wore a long beige coat even though it wasn't that cold and walked slowly, dragging a small black suitcase behind her. She didn't look like the kind of person you'd expect in a hostel full of students and backpackers. She didn't say anything when she came in, just went straight to her bed, climbed up to the top bunk, and lay down facing the wall. We thought maybe she was just tired. One of us said something like, "Hey, where are you from?" Just trying to be friendly, but she didn't even turn around. We laughed it off. People are different, and maybe she didn't speak English or didn't feel like talking. It wasn't that weird. We've met all kinds of people on the trip. Some you talk to, some you don't. It wasn't a big deal. That first night was uneventful. She barely moved. No sound from her bed, no tossing or turning. In fact, I remember thinking how unusually still she was. It was kind of nice, actually. In hostels, there's always someone snoring or getting up to use the bathroom or whispering on the phone. But she just stayed there the whole night. I fell asleep listening to the soft hum of traffic through the window and the occasional muffled laughter from the street. The next day, we were out for most of it. We walked through the city, saw the Berlin Wall, ate street food, took 100 photos. We only came back to the room late at night. Her bed was empty. No suitcase, no purse, nothing on the mattress. We thought she might have checked out. Her stuff was gone, and her blanket had been folded neatly. We didn't think much about it. Sometimes people just leave without saying anything. We got ready for bed, brushed our teeth, took turns using the shower down the hall. It was a normal night. I went to sleep quickly, exhausted from the walking and the noise of the day. I don't know what time it was when I woke up, but it was still dark. The curtain was closed, and the air in the room felt colder than usual. At first, I didn't know why I was awake. I thought maybe someone had gotten up to use the bathroom, but then I realized there was a light in the room. Not the overhead light, a smaller one, a flashlight maybe, and it was moving. It was shining across the beds, stopping on each one like someone was checking. Then I heard voices, low, serious voices. Not loud, but loud enough that I could tell they weren't trying to be quiet. I stayed still, thinking it was just someone drunk, or maybe a staff member doing rounds or something. But then the flashlight landed on me, right in the eyes, and I sat up, shielding my face. That's when I saw them. 2 men in uniform, police, actual Berlin police officers. One had a notepad, the other was holding the flashlight. Behind them was a younger guy, probably a hostile staff member. He looked nervous, hands in his pockets, standing by the door. No one said anything to us. The police just walked to the bunk bed where the old lady had been sleeping the night before. They looked up, then checked the locker next to it. They opened it with a key, took out a few things, and placed them in a large Ziploc evidence bag. Some papers, a wallet, and a folded piece of clothing. I couldn't see clearly. We were all awake by then. Nobody said a word, but I could feel the tension. One of my friends sat up slowly. Another rubbed his eyes like he still wasn't sure if this was real or a dream. The officers stayed only a few more minutes. They didn't explain anything, didn't even acknowledge us. When they left, the hostile worker finally said something quiet in German, and then closed the door behind them. The room was silent for a long time. None of us went back to sleep right away. Eventually, someone whispered, "What the hell was that?" But no one had an answer. The next morning, we went downstairs to ask at the front desk. The girl there didn't know much. She just said the police had come to collect the belongings of a guest who had passed away. That was the word she used, passed away. We asked if it was the woman from our room. She nodded, looked uncomfortable, and said she couldn't give more details. But it was obvious. We pieced it together later that day. One of the other hostel guests had overheard the staff talking. Apparently, the old woman had killed herself. Not in the hostel, but somewhere nearby, maybe a park or a train station, no one knew for sure. The police had come to collect her things the night they found her, which meant we had spent the night before sleeping in the same room as her. Her last night alive. It didn't feel spooky, not in the way ghost stories do. There were no strange noises, no cold chills, no nightmares. But it stayed with me. The idea of someone sharing a space with you, sleeping just a few feet above your head, and being in such a place mentally that they were already planning to leave the world. And none of us had any clue. We joked a lot on that trip, took dumb pictures, made fun of each other's snoring, argued over who lost the hostel key. But none of us joked about that night. Not really. The moment we found out what had happened, everything felt heavier. I remember lying in bed the next night and staring at the top bunk, thinking how silent she'd been, how carefully her bag had been packed, how she never said a word to any of us. We left Berlin a day later. I never looked up her name or tried to find out more. I didn't want to. I don't think the others did either. Sometimes I still think about her though. Not because I'm scared, but because of how close you can be to someone, physically close, and still have no idea what they're going through. She was just there, quiet, present, and then gone. That hostel room, that bunk bed, that cold night with the flashlight. It's all burned into my memory now. And every time I stay in a shared dorm since then, I always look at the people around me a little differently. You never really know who's sleeping beside you. We were on a road trip across 3 states and stopped in a small town in Missouri for the night. Nothing was planned too carefully. We just drove until we got tired and pulled off the highway. The town wasn't much. Just a few gas stations, some closed-up stores, and one of those motels with exterior hallways and doors facing the parking lot. The sign said $45 a night, which honestly should have told us something, but it was getting late and we were exhausted. The guy at the front desk gave us a key to room 207. It was on the 2nd floor, right in the middle of the building. As soon as we opened the door, we noticed how loud it was. The metal frame scraped against the floor and the hinges groaned like they hadn't been oiled in a decade. Even just pushing it open an inch made a screech that echoed down the whole floor. We looked at each other and laughed a little. It was the kind of place where everything felt slightly off. Yellow-stained walls, a stale smell in the air, and a remote with dead batteries. The room had 2 double beds, a small TV, a desk that wobbled, and a dusty lamp that flickered when you turned it on. The carpet was matted down and had these weird darker stains. like someone had spilled drinks or food and no one ever bothered to clean it up. But we were too tired to care. We dropped our bags, ate some gas station food we'd picked up earlier, and got ready for bed. The door noise was stuck in my head. I made a comment about it as I changed into sweatpants, and one of my friends joked that if someone tried to sneak in during the night, we'd definitely hear it. It was true, you couldn't touch that door without making a racket. We left our shoes by the door and plugged in our phones. The AC unit by the window rattled, but at least it worked. After brushing my teeth, I noticed the lock on the door was a little janky. It had one of those push-button knobs and a flimsy security chain. I meant to double-check it before sleeping, but I guess I got distracted. We all climbed into our beds and passed out fast. The next morning, I woke up first. It was still early. Light came through the thin curtains in that dull gray tone you see in old hotels. I sat up, stretched, and went to the bathroom. Everything felt normal. One of my friends was still snoring. The other one rolled over and mumbled something. I washed my face and started packing my bag. That's when I saw it. There was a pair of pants draped over the desk chair. At first, I thought they belonged to one of my friends, maybe just left out from the night before. But something about them felt off. They weren't familiar. Dark jeans, but not the kind either of us had worn. The color was a little different. Faded in some places, but newer looking in others. They weren't folded, just sort of hanging there, slumped like someone had taken them off in a rush. I asked both my friends whose they were, and both said not theirs. We even checked our bags to be sure. No one remembered seeing them last night. I was sure they hadn't been there when we checked in. I would have noticed something like that, especially since I sat in that exact chair to eat chips and scroll through my phone before bed. It was one of those moments where your stomach drops, but your brain tries to push it away. We all started looking around the room, a little tense now. The window was locked from the inside. The bathroom door creaked when we opened it, but it was empty. Closet was clear. Nothing else in the room was touched. Our bags were closed, nothing was missing, and our wallets and phones were still charging where we'd left them. Then I remembered the door. I walked over and saw it was closed, but not locked. The chain wasn't hooked, and the knob wasn't pushed in. We'd forgotten to lock it. That's when things started to feel real. We went completely quiet, just staring at each other. Someone had come into our room while we were sleeping, without us hearing anything, which made no sense because, again, that door was loud. You couldn't even jiggle the handle without making a sound. And they didn't take anything. They just left their pants. No wallet inside, no phone, no ID. We checked the pockets. Empty except for a crumpled receipt from a diner 3 towns back. No name, just #42 cheeseburger combo, 9:23 p.m. We didn't know what to do with that. The rest of the room was exactly how we'd left it. No signs of struggle, no broken locks, no scratches on the door, no mud on the carpet. But still, those pants, they shouldn't have been there. We packed our stuff fast. None of us were hungry anymore. The vibe in the room had changed completely. That stale air felt heavier. None of us said much, just kept giving each other looks. Before we left, I made one last sweep of the room, still trying to come up with a normal explanation. Maybe someone at the motel had gotten confused. Maybe they had a master key. Maybe someone was drunk or on something and wandered into the wrong room. But none of that made sense. That door would have woken us up. No question. We heard it every time one of us went to the bathroom during the night. When we got to the front desk to return the key, I asked if anyone else had a key to room 207. The woman there just gave me a bored look and said, "Only me and the night manager." I didn't ask anything else. I didn't want to push it. I could tell by the way she said it, this place had probably had its fair share of weird stuff and no one cared. We left and didn't talk much until we were a couple towns away. Then we started going over it again and again. How someone could have come in, undressed, and left without a sound. Why they wouldn't take anything. Why we didn't wake up. We checked our phones, no weird photos, no missing time. Just that one detail. A strange pair of pants that didn't belong to anyone. I kept thinking about how close they must have gotten to us. Like, in the same room, just a few feet away, while we were sleeping. Did they stand there watching us? Did they plan to do something and then change their mind? Were they drunk? On drugs? Was it some kind of messed up joke? It messed with our heads. The trip went on, but that night stuck with us. Even now, years later, I still think about it. I still see those pants, slouched over the chair like someone had peeled them off and stepped out of them mid-step. It's not the most violent thing that can happen in a motel, I know that, but it got under my skin more than anything else has. We never figured it out. We threw the pants in the motel dumpster before leaving, like getting rid of them would somehow erase the feeling. Didn't. They were just pants, but they weren't ours, and they weren't supposed to be there. I was around 11 when we lived in that motel. We didn't have a house or apartment at the time. Things had gotten bad financially, and my parents figured staying in one of those long-term motels was better than sleeping in a car. It was one of those places with outside stairwells and doors that opened straight into the parking lot. There were maybe 3 floors. We were on the top floor, and the rooms all looked the same. Ugly patterned carpet, old wood furniture, thin sheets, and the smell of cheap cleaning spray that never really went away. At first, I didn't think anything of it. As a kid, you just adapt. I'd get home from school and walk up the stairs, past cracked paint and cigarette butts, to our room. I got used to hearing people shouting in other rooms or loud TVs through the thin walls. Most of the people there weren't just passing through. Some had been living there for months, maybe years. You could tell by the furniture people dragged in or the way they decorated their windows. It wasn't exactly a community, but people nodded at each other. You learned who was safe to talk to and who wasn't. My dad was friendly, maybe too friendly. He talked to everyone, especially the other long-term folks. One guy he got close to was a man in his 30s or 40s. I never knew his name, but I remember his face. He had that sunken, tired look that never changed. Always wore the same army green jacket, no matter the weather. He lived a few rooms down from us on the same floor. My dad would sit outside on the walkway smoking and talking with him for hours some evenings. Then one night, the guy was dead. Word spread fast around the motel. He'd accidentally shot himself. That's what we were told, but people gossiped. Some said it didn't seem like an accident. Some said he'd been depressed. Some even said someone else might have done it, but no one really had proof. The police came, taped off the area for a while, and then everything moved on like nothing happened. The next tenant moved into that room maybe 2 weeks later. That's when things got weird. First, it was small stuff. I'd hear footsteps late at night, heavy ones, like boots coming up the metal stairs outside. I'd peek through the blinds, expecting to see someone, but there was no one. I told myself it was just someone walking by quietly. Maybe they went back down the other stairs. But then it kept happening, always late, always slow, deliberate steps, and never anyone there. Sometimes I'd see shadows move under our door, like someone walking past, but when I looked outside, the walkway would be empty. Our room was near the corner, so not a lot of people had reason to walk by unless they lived at the far end. My mom and brother acted like it was nothing. They said it was probably someone drunk or a raccoon or wind playing tricks. But my dad noticed it too. He got quiet after that man died. He didn't hang out outside anymore. He stopped smoking altogether. I remember one night, it was late, maybe 2 or 3 in the morning. I was half awake, just staring at the ceiling. I heard our room door open fast, like someone had been thrown against it. It slammed shut again just as quick. I got up and peeked out of my room. My dad was sitting on the edge of the bed, breathing heavy, drenched in sweat. He didn't say anything, just kept rubbing his face. I went back to bed. I was scared, but I didn't know what to say. The next morning, he was already gone when I woke up. A few days later, we packed everything up. No warning, no explanation. Just started putting things in the car. My mom looked annoyed, but she didn't argue. I think she was just used to following my dad's decisions by then. I asked why we were leaving, and all he said was that he didn't want to stay another night. Years later, I asked him again. I was older by then, maybe in college. We were sitting in his garage just talking. He finally told me what happened that night. He said he'd woken up because he felt like someone was watching him. Thought it was my mom or maybe me. He looked toward the window and saw someone standing there, just outside the glass, face up against it. The problem was, there was no way to stand outside that window. We were on the 3rd floor, no balcony, no ledge, nothing but open air below. The walkway was on the other side of the room by the door. The window looked out over the back lot and a patch of grass with some garbage bins. No fire escape, no tree to climb, nothing. He said the face looked familiar. Pale, sunken eyes, same jacket. It was the man he used to talk to, the one who accidentally shot himself. My dad didn't wait. He said he jumped out of bed and ran out the door barefoot. He didn't even realize what he was doing, just pure instinct. He stayed outside for a few minutes, circling the building, checking the back, trying to find any sign that someone had been out there. But there wasn't anything. When he came back inside, everything was quiet again. No one had woken up. My mom was still asleep, and I guess she didn't even hear him leave. But he said something changed in him after that. Like the fear didn't go away. He couldn't make sense of what he saw, but he knew he didn't imagine it. That was enough for him. He said, asterisk, that wasn't a dream, and I know what I saw, and that man wasn't alive anymore. Asterisk. He didn't say it was a ghost. He never used that word. He hated anything like that. He just said maybe the guy never really left the motel. Not in the usual way. And whatever the truth was, he didn't want it near his family anymore. We never talked about it again. The funny thing is, after we left, nothing strange ever happened again. Not in the next place or the place after that. Life was still hard, still unstable for a while, but the weirdness stayed behind at that motel. I've never gone back, never even driven by. Sometimes I think about that place, about the people still living there, still walking those same stained walkways, climbing the same creaky stairs. And I wonder if they ever see anything outside their window that shouldn't be there.